Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have another record-breaking attendance for one of our webinars. We're so excited to be sharing more about kind of clinical trial financial management and Auxilius. Today, really excited to have one of our clients on to help support today's discussion around kind of building clinical trial financial management at small to mid-sized biotechs. I think from our audience, we have really kind of every sort of kind of biotech, from clients, from folks looking to just getting started in the clinic to organizations already in the clinic and looking to kind of revamp their processes around clinical trial financial management and looking at possible solutions that can help support that. So we're excited to be able to help you guys really think through solutions, processes as it relates to clinical trial financial management. Again, we're going to be using this time really to talk through with Christian from Immuneering, who's a client of Auxilius, to really share kind of their development of building up the clinical financial processes there, but then also talk about more specifically how they think about kind of tool stack, how they think about kind of evaluating Auxilius and how that engagement and what has been to date and what their experience has been like. So before we get started, we'll do quick introductions. I'm Barrett Wilson. I'm the Senior Director of Business Development at Auxilius. I've been here for 5 years now. I feel like I've known these folks just as long as I've been at Auxilius. First, we have probably one of the most influential names in clinical trial accounting right now, Christy. Christy, you want to do a quick intro?
Hi, everyone. Happy to be joining you today. I'm Christy Sasso. I'm the Senior Director of Accounting and Governance here at Auxilius. I've been here for about 3 years now, helping lead customer implementations and all things governance, SOX controls, audit, you name it.
Awesome. And then we have a proud but sad lifelong Jets fan, Christian. Christian, you want to do a quick intro?
That's a good way to bring me in. Thank you. So my name is Christian Alai. I'm the Senior Director of FP&A at Immuneering. I've been here since June of 2021, so I'm actually closing in on 5 years. And it's been a pretty great ride. I started when we were still preclinical before our lead program started in clinic, and now we're into phase 3. So I've been able to see the full life. It's been great.
Amazing. Yeah, and I feel like I've kind of been along for that ride as well. And
You have the entire time.
Yeah, no, so excited to see where you guys are today. I think just for our listeners, can you tell us just in general a little bit more about Immuneering? Obviously, you guys are in phase 3 now, but kind of what you guys are supporting, kind of team and like kind of team dynamics there.
Yeah, so our lead product is atebimetinib. We're just kicking off our phase 3. We actually dosed our first patient earlier in the month and announced that, so it's very, very exciting. And our trial is in first-line pancreatic cancer in combination with gemcitabine, nab-paclitaxel, can't say that, which is a chemo. And we've had some really exciting results in a group of patients who haven't really seen much innovation in their area, so it's been great to see the improvement that we can bring. So my main area is budgeting and forecasting, but given that we're a small team, I also work on the accounting side with the CRO and CMO monthly entries. So I track those. We do that basically on a percentage of completion method. So I've been tracking all the larger expenses and booking those on a monthly basis. And that's also how I became the lead with the clinical trial accounting.
Amazing. Thank you for that background. Yep. And also, sorry, real quick for our audience, feel free as we go through topics to drop questions in the chat. We'll also have a dedicated Q&A session towards the end of our interview, but feel free if anything jumps out to put something in. But yeah, Christian, thank you for that background and kind of your day-to-day support. I think, we see a lot of different like kind of organizational dynamics around like who owns what when it comes to clinical trial financial management, whether that's like accounting led, it's led, and also with that support of ClinOps. And I think it's really great to see like folks that are in your role in this FP&A role that do support both sides of that equation, both as kind of for the FP&A and forecasting along with the accruals, because I think you kind of see the whole end-to-end of managing a clinical trial. And so I think you're the perfect person to be speaking about just this topic overall, but also how you fully leverage the Auxilius platform for both those use cases. Before we kind of jump in a little bit more about tools and processes and tools, just to kind of restate the problem that is everything clinical trial financials. Can you give us, and actually maybe Chrissy, you go first because you've also just see this generally across our client base, but like, why is this so challenging to manage? Why is accruals hard in clinical trials?
Yeah, so the accrual, as we all know, is your best estimate of the expense given the data that you have at the time. And for these really complex oncology trials, especially as you get later on into phase 3, the data is super sensitive. So being able to get additional clinical information to back up what you guys are estimating has occurred in the trial has been or is typically pretty difficult to get just due to the sensitivity of the data. And the other main thing I'd say is just the variability in those other expenses that aren't just the standard schedule of assessments. So if you think to like a vaccine trial, there's really like few visits in that schedule of assessments. There's not a ton of other variable expenses happening on scheduled visits, invoiceables outside of those standard visits. Whereas with oncology trials, you'll see there's not a set amount of cycles that a patient may go through. Follow-up visits are variable, and then those invoiceable amounts for CT scans, MRIs, those can really add up materiality-wise, and it's hard to estimate what your expenses will be for those costs forecasting, and then also on the actual side, because some things are covered by standard of care, insurance. So really getting visibility into what you'll actually be paying for those variable costs is pretty difficult.
Christian, anything else you want to kind of add to that point from your direct experience?
Yeah, so the most challenging piece that Chrissy was finishing with is the payments. And for me in finance, my main goal is cash runway, is figuring out how far our cash can take us. And that's the most important piece of what I do. And this has been the most challenging. You have the late invoiceables that come in from sites, and we've seen them come in 2-3 years later. And they're not just small, couple of $1,000s here and there, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's what I've found is the biggest piece where Auxilius has been able to help us to show what's out there potentially, so then we can book to that from to be accurate on a monthly close perspective, but so then we know on the forecasting side with our cash what's potentially out there, and we can plan accordingly. Because if we don't know what's out there, then it'll be a big surprise, and hundreds of thousands of dollars is too much of a surprise for a small biotech.
And to put like kind of like oftentimes I see people that maybe aren't as sophisticated around their clinical trial financials or is just like kind of new into the space. A lot of them are like, I rely on what my CRO is reporting. I rely, like, why do I need to think about this separately from what my CRO is reporting? Could you kind of give the background on why it makes sense to kind of have your own point of view in addition to what your CRO is providing?
So the biggest issue with what the CRO provides is it's just a payment report, essentially, is what it boils down to. And I found a few issues with that. Obviously, the invoicing lag, their payment detail is fully reliant on the site's invoicing timely, which probably everyone on the call would expect. If you have a service that you're due to be paid for, a site should want to send the invoice, and we as the sponsor will want to pay it. For some reason, sites are very, very delayed in sending those invoices. So that's where there's a big lag, and that's a big hole in what the CRO is providing every month. And it's not necessarily their fault. It's just that's what they provide. So that's what I've found to be the biggest issue. And with what Auxilius will provide, which is the EDC data. So this is data that is directly from the sites that they entered. They typically enter pretty timely because our clinical operations team, and I'm sure everyone else's would be as well, is on top of getting that data in because they need that data in order to continue with the trial. So as Auxilius pulls the EDC data, they're able to calculate the costs that are out there. So that's the biggest help. Is it's kind of like the EDC is the Bible. So you know what's out there, and then you can evaluate versus just a CRO sending a payment report.
Got it. So it's really about being able to have kind of more hands-on, real-time visibility into those expenses versus maybe waiting on just this one source of data coming in.
Exactly.
I also make a dark joke that when someone says they fully rely on the CRO, if your CRO said jump off this bridge, would you also listen to them? So I think it's really important to be able to triangulate across.
And that's another point that I did want to make, that some CROs are great. I've had good relationships. We've had a couple different ones. We've had good relationships, and we have some that weren't as good, where you don't have as much trust. So it's very difficult to parse through all the data to confirm what the CRO is telling you, especially when you're going through site closeouts, because there's so much data to look through. So having Auxilius also helps with that, getting through the data and confirming what the CRO is saying was paid, that it should be paid, because they're supposed to be essentially auditing the site's payments as well, but it's still our money, so we need to have our eyes on it as well.
Right, and it's not really out of malice by the CRO necessarily. It's just challenges with their processes internally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Awesome. So to our next point, I want to dig in a little bit more into like how you guys think about, like, how you guys thought about looking at a solution to help support with your clinical trial financial management, the process, the evaluation that you went through, and then we'll spend a little bit more time on Auxilius specifically. But like, what drove you initially to look towards, and also we're kind of Auxilius is part of clinical trial financial management wholly, and it's a kind of a new category. But what made you to start look for a tool to support this versus like maybe headcount or whatever it may be?
So when you had first checked in with me only a couple of months ago, right? And then this relationship hasn't been that long. So when you checked in, I think it was after a life science conference back in 2022, and we started exploring the idea of moving into this, and I saw what was really out there, because I hadn't seen anything before this. I knew from my previous company at Immunomedics, before we were purchased by Gilead, that we had a headcount that was solely responsible for all R&D accounting. So for me, the business case really spoke for itself, that we can bring this tool on and continue with the same team size and not need to bring on a full-time, an FTE just for clinical trial accounting. So that, to me, I thought the business case spoke for itself. It was, it took some time due to, obviously, again, being a small biotech, the runway was an issue, funding was an issue. But then it became even more important for us to bring this on, because we were able to kind of piece through the phase 2 data and get to a good point before we had to move into phase 3. And as we were going through that and we're able to get to a good point with phase 2, the model that we created was in no way scalable. So we knew that the phase 3 was the absolute trigger point that we needed to move forward if we wanted to keep our monthly close accurate, keep our auditors happy, and also, to have a good, efficient process for me for forecasting.
And that all makes sense. Can you talk through kind of like maybe the steps you took to go through like kind of your evaluation? Like who were you connecting with internally to start this discussion? Who did you need to get buy-in from? Just general steps you took, because I think also on our call, I think we have a lot of director level folks that are also kind of in the same position that maybe on the numbers, but then need kind of support from other folks to help maybe consider a solution like Auxilius.
So being sensitive to the fact that we're G&A, we're a support function, so we don't want to just continue to add on more tools. We as a team, because of course I brought in everyone on the accounting side, of course my boss Mallory, to get buy-in. We got buy-in from the CEO Ben, but we wanted to also bring in the ClinOps team, the clinical operations, to make sure that they can see the value and to present the tool not just as something for finance to use, it's something that the clinical team can use as well. So there's some cross-functional use. I've spoken about how important it is, especially for the cash runway, to have this detailed you know, the invoiceables and the visits from the EDC, so we know what's out there. But I thought that it was very important to get buy-in from the clinical operations team so that they can see that it could help them as well, bring some efficiencies to them so they can be cross-functional.
And I think that's, and it's what's great is that our platform does provide really, I think one of the big benefits, not only supporting from an accounting and FP&A perspective, but it allows everyone to leverage kind of the same source data to have kind of that single centralized place for all of your clinical trial financials. And so like with clinical operations, being able to kind of benefit from the data outputs that are coming in and making sure everyone's on the same change order version or the same contract version, it really helps, I think, for internal communication as well. And that makes sense that, you know, so you brought everybody in to help kind of review and evaluate the tool. And then you kind of went up to leadership for approval. So was the business case just everyone's kind of bought into this thing that it makes sense, or like what kind of justification did you need to have with your leadership?
It was, we also did look at a competitor, and at that time that company just didn't, you know, fulfill the needs, and it wasn't just didn't fit like Auxilius does. So we did want to make sure that we looked at competitors as well to show that we're, you know, that we're looking outside of just Auxilius, but just showing the importance of maintaining accuracy with the close. You know, our CEO is very supportive of making sure that we're fully in compliance, and you know, we put together a very strong business case, like I said, outlining all of the issues and all the risks, and he was fully supportive, understanding that, you know, we're not looking to take on any additional risks, especially with the phase 3, and how much additional work it's going to cost to maintain that level of accuracy, and in some areas it wasn't even going to be possible. So he was fully supportive for those reasons.
And I guess, like, I mean, the timing obviously makes sense. You just started your phase 3 and you're ready to kind of onboard ready to onboard Auxilius, but like it's not that your focus is so much more than just clinical trial financials. Like I'm sure you guys were thinking about other technology solutions for other aspects of your guys' role, or thinking about you know, maybe there's some larger like SOX SOX workshops that you guys were working through, or et cetera. But like, how did you prioritize? Like, how were you able to weigh the kind of prioritization of Auxilius versus like maybe putting another implementation on hold, or delaying another implementation to focus on Auxilius?
So it really just came back to the phase 3 and the fundraise. So we had a really a great fundraise back in September, which was able to fund us through 2029, which fully funded the phase 3. So it was looked at as able to fully support phase 3. That this is what we would absolutely need. So those are the two big caveats. We needed the money, obviously, and we wouldn't be able to start the phase 3 without that money. So being able to, you know, have a successful raise and starting phase 3, those are the two big triggers for us.
Makes sense. And now that we have you on, we are. Is there a question in the Q&A? Oh, we got Dan. Sorry, I'm getting used to this. Let's see, Christy, do you want to answer this one?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to this. So yeah, standard of care is typically something that we see across all of our oncology customers. It is difficult to predict upfront. What we're able to do with that investigator payments reconciliation is compare what we've built out in the model based off of the contracted costs in the EDC, and then what's actually coming through as being billed or covered with that standard of care, and then recalibrate our model to factor in those assumptions. Or if you have historical data, so Immuneering and Christian's team, for example, had already been seeing, based off their historical data, that about 50% of their imaging was being covered by standard of care. So we were able to build that into the model up front and then recalibrate once we did that initial investigator payments reconciliation to see what was actually ending up being billed against the imaging that we were seeing in the EDC data. So we're able to build in initial assumptions just based off of historicals, what we've seen on other trials or what we've seen across our customer base, and then constantly making sure we're recalibrating that model to be accurate based off of what's actually being billed through that payments report.
Yeah, Dan's question, if you don't mind me jumping in as well. Dan's question, that was a big issue that we're having as well, because there's it's almost like a black box. You don't know what the site actually billed insurance. It says, a lot of our site budgets say standard of care or sponsor, so it's extremely vague. And just because we didn't get billed in a few months, that doesn't mean that we're not going to get billed. So that's something that we're continuing to evaluate. As Christy said, we've seen a certain amount of percentage get billed. And what's great about the tool is we were able to add in like kind of a manual adjustment based on the reconciliation that we've done for Q1 and that we will perform for Q2 to support the amount of procedures that we're accruing for the month and for the Q. And then we're going to do the same thing for phase 3. There's a lot of new sites, and there's obviously, it's a global trial, so there's a lot of new things for us. So we'll probably start with 100% and then continue to see where the data takes us and keep doing that same reconciliation. But we've had the same problem in, figuring out what the site's actually going to bill us.
Thanks, Dan. Sorry, I didn't see your question. Cool. All right. So moving on, Christian, you're now about a year in with Auxilius. How's things going so far? How's things working with the team, working with the platform?
Everything's been great so far. We were able to get phase 2, which was a trial that we had already started a few years ago, which was nice to start with a trial that we were comfortable with. So we had a good baseline as to where we expected the cost. So it helped us with the implementation. And both Christy and Zach have been extremely helpful walking us through the tool. I mean, the whole team has been super helpful. We met and discussed some potential, not problems, but things that we saw as limitations for our phase 3. We talked that through with Erin, and she was happy to help us through that as well. So just everyone on the team is always looking to help out and very receptive to any feedback on the tool.
Yeah, I absolutely love our support team. I think it's just we have just really great experience and exposure with clinical trial accounting. I've seen it across so many therapeutic areas, so many different kind of CROs and everything like that we just get a really good sense on how to support the build out on Auxilius. Christy, do you want to maybe share a little bit of background, just like the team that support you, that supports our clients?
Yeah, we have a great team with a bunch of different backgrounds. A bunch of us are, CPAs with that Big Four audit background, auditing biotechs in our past experience. We have clinical trial finance coming from consulting side. And then we also have clinical SMEs coming directly from the clinical side, ClinOps, the site payments team, who are super familiar with those CTAs and how the costs are being contracted with all the different sites. So we have a great range of minds here that come and collaborate on how to best get these trials set up within Auxilius. And then we also just have such a broad customer base that we've seen so many different types of trials, all the different nuances, all the different things like the standard of care that come up commonly on these oncology trials. So building a really great knowledge base has been super helpful for us to be able to get customers comfortable with how we're building out their models in Auxilius and get them the more accurate expense estimate. Constantly we're hearing from our customers like, oh, how do your other oncology customers handle this thing? Or what do you typically see for this issue? And so having that knowledge base from our previous backgrounds and then also just from all the different customers has been super helpful.
You can tell that the tool was built pretty much by auditors when you see all of the native internal controls that are built in, the monthly close checklist. It's very audit friendly. So we haven't had any issues with getting our auditors, comfortable with the system. Sorry, that's me.
Oh, whoops. Okay. Well, great. I think actually just while Christian's fire alarm is going off for a second, I think just one additional thing, because we were talking a little bit about controls. Christy, do you want to just share a little bit about, like, obviously we support from the project engagement, but obviously we support a lot of public clients. About 75% of our client base is public biotechs. Can you share a little bit about what we do in addition to our project support of how we help their auditors get comfortable with Auxilius?
Yeah, so I think the main thing, we have a really great SOC 1 report with our internal controls. So that's very easily relied upon by our clients' auditors. And then we also just make sure that they're very comfortable with how the system works. I meet directly with our customers' auditors, give them walkthroughs through the system, and make sure that they're understanding how we've built out this client-specific model into Auxilius, where we're getting the data from, how that data gets transferred from system to system, and what controls are in place to make sure that we have completeness and accuracy of all the data that we're processing. So I think it's really just helping them understand all of the inputs into Auxilius, how it's being processed, so that way they can get comfortable with that resulting journal entry or accrual.
And Christian, you felt that pretty easily as you guys walked through with your auditors.
Yeah, but everything was, super clear for them. Like they haven't had any problems or additional questions. So it's been very straightforward for them, which makes our life much easier.
Very cool. One other thing I want to talk about is as far as kind of early wins in implementation. So what's nice about I think you've experienced this through our engagements with Auxilius, we are building out the model alongside you. And so you're able to really see your data come together in Auxilius well. What was some early wins, Christian, that you saw like during the implementation that was like either that aha moment or like immediately getting value back from the system?
When we were able to get the EDC connection, and we saw all of the scans and procedures that were out there, that to me was huge. And we met as a team and figured out what the best path forward is. Did a full reconciliation on the previous payments and what we see out there. So that was, like I said, the biggest aha moment, just seeing all that's out there and all the potential costs that could have caught us by surprise.
That's great. Maybe taking so we've talked a lot about setting up our investigator model. So that's where we pull all the site agreements in and we map that against your protocol, your EDC data, to come up with those expenses. You've talked about really leveraging the reconciliation component to be able, can you talk through maybe and reconciliation against kind of what the CRO is billing versus what we're calculating expenses? Could you maybe just take it one step further of what that process is, what kind of outcomes directly that you're seeing or that you saw?
Between what the CRO and what Auxilius is taking from in the EDC?
Yeah, just the mapping of that, and then what was the output?
Yeah, so I mean, coming in and getting all of the procedures that the sites are coding, and being able to use the tool to take all those costs by, because each site budget directly from the site budget. So that's the other great piece that, with how accurate it is, being able to put each cost for each procedure and scan that can be very, very expensive. There are some that go upwards of $8,000-9,000 depending on the site. So being able to directly attribute an EDC, something entered into EDC directly to the site costs, was really big for us. And just talked about before, the CRO is only giving us the payments that are out there. So we don't know what the real activity is. We've also seen where if a site sends an invoice, a very large invoice, and the CRO rejects it for whatever reason, it could be something very small, but the entire invoice then needs to be rejected. That then falls off the payment schedule. So then it makes it seem like your expenses, if you're only relying on the CRO payment, it just dropped down by hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially, when that should be costs that are accrued. So that's another area where I saw that the CRO payment ledger run is kind of limited, and where the tool would help us.
Awesome. And I think we got some questions on on just this topic of investigator management in Auxilius. Christy, you want to jump in on these?
Yeah, so Dan was asking, I'm going to break this question into two parts. One, are there some best practices for like reviewing the EDC to identify missed visits? So within our system, we are able to build in projected patient visits based off of your schedule of assessments. So if we know your cycles are typically 28 days long and we're anticipating 18 cycles or however many it may be, we're able to fill in the gap for when we would expect a visit to have occurred just based off of that standard cycle count, or your schedule of assessments where, your baseline visit happens and then visit 1 happens 2 weeks later, visit 3, 4, etc. So we're able to anticipate when those visits may have likely occurred but have yet to be entered into the EDC data. So that way you can accrue for additional expenses that may be lagging on the site side, entering that into the EDC. And then in terms of matching the confirmed visits with the billed visits for the CRO, that's what we're able to do with our investigator reconciliation tool. We're taking our EDC-based expenses, so we're seeing all those procedures and visits occurring in the EDC, and then comparing that line by line to what's being billed in that CRO report, and comparing, exact matches to see, okay, this patient had this visit, yep, that ties out, or there's some visits in the EDC that have yet to been billed to the CRO, or vice versa. So we're able to review that line by line and match that up and see where there's any discrepancies. And then Martin had a question on standard reports. Yes, typically there are, depending on your EDC provider, whether it's Metadata, Rave, or Viva, there are standard reports. We're able to identify for your specific trial how that EDC database has been built out, and then request the specific reports that we'll need in order to pull in the relevant data. So that's part of our implementation process, is reviewing how your specific trial's EDC has been configured and then requesting the corresponding reports that we'll want to use.
Awesome. Well, so as we're starting to get close on time, so Christian, you like Auxilius, pretty good tool?
Yeah, so far so good, definitely.
Awesome. I guess just whether it's question for both of you to kind of, do we have another question? Peter, is there a way to? Yes, there is a way to account for sites are late in entering EDC data. We have a projected model that allows you to basically take in the kind of the visit schedule and make assumptions on visits that were supposed to occur that have yet to been entered at that specific site and what the rate is. That we can take that even a step further and forecast out and plan around all future patient visits as well. There's a lot we can do around the leveraging the underlying site agreement data to build out your expenses and forecasts. Awesome. So as we're wrapping up here, before we go into the Q&A, whether it's just specific to Auxilius or more just around clinical trial financial processes in general, is there any kind of recommendations or tips that you want to give the audience just to consider as they are either starting a trial or they're midway through a trial to start considering?
Yeah, for me, I think that the biggest thing is to align with your CRO early, and make sure that they're providing you with as much detail as possible, depending on what phase you're in, but patient level detail for each visit and for each procedure, any invoiceables. You would need all that information so you can dig in and figure out what's going to be out there. Because if you're trying to do this yourself, if you're not able to move forward with the tool yet, that's what you need to fully understand what's out there in order to make sure that your costs are correct and to make sure that you can properly forecast it. And then when you are able to move forward with an implementation, it makes the actual implementation that much easier when you know everything, what's going into the tool, so you can understand how important it is and how much data it's parsing through. I think that it's really important to get grounded as to what's out there.
Christy, anything from you? Just happy to be here. Sweet. All right. With 5 to 10 minutes left, Feel free to drop any additional questions, anything and everything, whether it's Auxilius specific or clinical trial financial management in general. Is there a chat going on too? Oh, okay, Q&A. We'll give it one more minute. See if there's any questions that are coming in. Okay, 30 more seconds.
Only the other thing I would say is make sure that the CRO is providing rejected bills. Like I had said, my CRO, after I noticed that there was a discrepancy month over month, we caught it within the quarter, so it wasn't a problem. They provided a list of invoices that were rejected. So that's something I would also ask for. We did that with our new CRO, and they said, "Oh, sites are just going to respond very quickly." I'm like, "Okay, that's fine. Just check for me, please." Sites are not quick.
No, they are not. They got too much going on with the patients. That's the problem.
Yep. We want to get them their money.
That's right. Well, all right. If there's no other questions, we can close this early. Feel free to connect with any of us on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with Christian directly if you have any more pointed questions about his experience. But Christian, thank you for joining for us today. Hope you have a good July 4th, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Have a good one. Bye.